The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and carpet cleaner. I sat across from a man I'd known my whole life. He slid a document across the desk without looking at me. I read it once. Then again. My daughter's name wasn't there. Every other grandchild was listed. Every single one. Hers was just missing. I looked up at my father. He was studying the window. Not nervous. Not guilty. Just waiting for me to say nothing. That's when I realized something was very wrong. I want to be careful about how I tell this, because it would be easy to make my father sound like a monster, and the truth is more complicated than that, and also, in some ways, worse. My father is 71 years old. He built a good life. He worked in civil engineering for 30 years, retired with a pension and 2 properties, and raised 3 children. I'm the middle one. My older brother lives 2 hours away. My younger sister is local, close to home, close to him. I got married later than both of them. My wife and I tried for years to have children biologically. It didn't work. When my daughter came into our lives through adoption, she was 2 years old. She's 9 now. She calls my mother Grandma. She draws her pictures. She saved her for a birthday card she made with her own hands using glitter glue and a paper plate. My father calls her your girl. Not by name. Not my granddaughter. Just, your girl. I noticed it a long time ago and I told myself it was generational. That some people just express warmth differently. That actions matter more than words. He showed up to her birthday parties. He sat at the table. He ate the cake. But he never held her the way he held my brother's kids. I saw it once, clearly, at a family barbecue 3 summers ago. My brother's youngest, 4 years old at the time, ran across the yard and jumped into my father's arms without warning. He caught her, laughed, swung her around. Genuine joy. The kind that reaches the eyes. My daughter walked over about 10 minutes later and held up a flower she'd found near the fence. She wanted to show him. He looked at it. Said nice. Handed it back. She stood there for a second, then walked away. I watched my wife watch that moment. We didn't talk about it that night. We've learned that some things, if you name them too early, become arguments instead of information. Then came the estate planning meeting. My father called it routine. He said he just wanted everything organized, wanted to make sure there was no confusion after he was gone. His words. No confusion. He asked me to come, which I did, alone, because my wife had work and we both thought it was probably just paperwork. A formality. The lawyer, a family friend, someone my parents have used for years, walked us through the document section by section. There was a life insurance policy. A bank account. The family home where my parents still live. And then there was the other property. That property, a modest house about 40 minutes north, is where my father plans to retire fully once my mother's health improves enough for them to relocate. It's been in the family for years. My father always called it the plan. The place they'd go when city life got too loud. The will divided assets among the grandchildren equally. Except my daughter wasn't listed as a grandchild. There was a footnote. Legal language. Something about biological descendants. I read it twice. Then I asked the lawyer to clarify. He looked at my father before answering. My father said, it's just how the document is worded. It's cleaner this way. Cleaner. I nodded. I didn't raise my voice. I asked one more question, whether this was standard language or a specific instruction, and the lawyer said it was a specific instruction. My father looked at the window again. I drove home in silence. That night, my daughter showed me a drawing she'd made at school. It was our family. Stick figures. Me, my wife, her. And at the top, in crayon, 2 more figures she labeled Grandma and Grandpa. I put it on the refrigerator. And I started thinking. My wife, when I told her, went quiet in a way I recognized. The kind of quiet that means she's deciding whether to cry or plan. She chose to plan. She asked me what I wanted to do. I told her I didn't know yet. She said, don't do anything until you know exactly what you're dealing with. That's the thing about being married to someone patient. They model the behavior you need. Over the next 2 weeks, I paid attention. I watched how my father spoke to my daughter at a Sunday lunch. How he answered her questions, technically, correctly, but without warmth. How he looked at my brother's children versus how he looked at her. I started keeping notes. Not obsessively. Just facts. Dates. Quotes. Small things I might have let go before. My brother, when I brought it up carefully, said I was reading too much into it. That our father was from a different generation. That the will language was probably just a lawyer thing. My sister said nothing. I noticed she said nothing. So I stopped reacting. And I started watching. The thing about watching someone carefully is that they don't change their behavior. They just stop hiding it. 2 weeks after the lawyer's office, my parents hosted a Sunday lunch. Nothing special. Roast chicken, rice, the usual. My brother came with his 3 kids. My sister came alone. My wife and I brought our daughter. After lunch, the kids moved to the living room. My mother put on a cartoon. The adults stayed at the table with tea. My father pulled out his phone and started showing my brother something. Photos, it looked like. He was scrolling, smiling, narrating quietly. My brother leaned in. Laughed at something. I watched from across the table. My father was showing photos from a trip he and my mother had taken with my brother's family the previous month. A short holiday. A cabin somewhere. I'd heard about it casually, after the fact, mentioned the way you mention weather. I hadn't been invited. More specifically, my daughter hadn't been included in the plan. And because she hadn't been included, my wife and I hadn't gone. I sat with my tea and I let that settle. After lunch, I helped my mother with the dishes. She thanked me the way she always does, quietly, sincerely. My mother is not a complicated person. She loves all her grandchildren. I have never doubted that. But she has spent 50 years managing my father's silences, and she has become very good at not seeing what makes her uncomfortable. I didn't push her. I drove home and I started going through my memory more carefully. I'm a systematic person by nature. I work in project management. I track things. I document things. It's not a personality flaw, it's just how I think. I went back through my phone. Message threads with my father. Invitations to family events over the past 3 years. Holiday gatherings. Birthday lunches. A family portrait session my mother organized the previous Christmas. My daughter was in some of them. But the ones that mattered, the ones that became framed photos on my parents' wall, the ones that got printed and sent to relatives, those were the ones taken before we arrived. Or after we left. Or on dates we weren't given. I looked at the photo on my parents' mantelpiece the next time I visited. My brother's 3 children. My sister's son. A formal portrait from last Christmas. My daughter was not in it. I had been in the room that day. I remember it. The photographer was a cousin's friend. It was treated casually, just a quick family photo before dinner. No one said stand together. No one excluded anyone loudly. But somehow, when the photo was printed and framed, my daughter wasn't in it. These things don't happen by accident. I started writing everything down in a notes app, 1 password protected. Dates. Events. Patterns. I didn't do it with anger. I did it the way I track a project at work, methodically, without emotion attached to the data. Then came the recording. I didn't plan it. I want to be honest about that. My sister called me on a Tuesday evening. She said she needed to talk. I stepped outside onto our back porch, and because I sometimes record calls for my own reference, work habit, nothing sinister, my phone was already set to do it automatically through an app I'd installed months before for business purposes. She started carefully. Asked how I was. Asked how my wife was. Then she said, Dad talked to me about the will. I said, okay. She said he'd asked her to explain it to me if I brought it up again. That his reasoning was that the estate should stay within the biological family line. That it wasn't about my daughter personally. That he respected our choice to adopt but felt that inheritance was different. That he had a right to decide where his assets went. She said it carefully. Like she'd rehearsed it. I asked her what she thought. Long pause. She said, I think it's his will. It's his decision. I said, and you agree with it? She didn't say yes. She also didn't say no. She said, I just think it's complicated. We ended the call politely. No argument. No raised voices. I sat on the porch for a while. Then I went inside, kissed my daughter on the top of her head while she was reading, and went to my home office and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the property records I had saved in a private folder. Because here is the thing my father had forgotten. Or maybe he assumed I'd never use it. 7 years ago, when he first purchased the retirement property, the one up north, the one in the will, he'd needed a cosigner on the financing. His credit at the time had a complication. Something with a business account he'd closed years before. Nothing serious, but enough that the bank wanted a second name on the paperwork. He asked me. I said yes, because he was my father and I didn't think twice. And then life moved forward, and the property got paid off early. He was disciplined about that, and the co-signing arrangement faded from conversation. I think he forgot I was still on the original deed. I never forgot. I pulled up the document. Read it slowly. My name was still there. I was still a legal co-owner of that property. The same property he had placed in a will that deliberately excluded my daughter. I closed the laptop. I didn't call him. I didn't message my sister. I didn't say a word to anyone that night except my wife, and even then I just said, I need to talk to a lawyer. She looked at me. I said, not yet. But soon. Confronting them would have ruined everything. There's a particular kind of calm that settles over you when you stop being hurt and start being clear. It's not coldness. It's not detachment. It's more like, the noise in your head finally stops, and what's left is just the next step. And the one after that. And the one after that. That's where I was the morning I called the lawyer. Not my father's lawyer. Mine. I found her through a colleague at work who'd gone through a property dispute 2 years earlier. He described her as someone who spoke quietly and moved fast. That was enough for me. I scheduled a consultation for a Thursday afternoon and told no one. Not my brother. Not my sister. Not my parents. I drove there alone, parked 2 blocks away out of habit, and sat in her office with a folder I'd spent 3 evenings putting together. Inside that folder was the original co-ownership deed from 7 years ago. A printed copy of my father's will, the version the family lawyer had shared with me, which I had quietly photographed on my phone before leaving that office. The recorded phone call with my sister. My notes. Dated. Organized. Time-stamped where possible. She read through everything without interrupting me. When I finished explaining, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You understand what this means for the property." I said I had a general sense but wanted to hear it from her. She explained it cleanly. As a legal co-owner, I had rights over that property that existed independently of any will. A will distributes what belongs solely to the deceased. It cannot distribute what is jointly owned without the co-owner's consent. My father could not simply assign that property to his other grandchildren, or anyone, without my agreement. Not legally. Not cleanly. She asked if he knew I still understood my position on the deed. I said I didn't think so. She nodded slowly. Made a note. She also told me something I hadn't fully considered. She said that the pattern I'd documented, the systematic exclusion of my daughter from family events, the deliberate omission from the will under a biological descendants clause, could be relevant in a broader legal context if I chose to pursue it. Not criminal. But meaningful. The kind of thing that, if it ever became a family court matter around anything related to my daughter's welfare or inheritance rights, would paint a very clear picture. I hadn't thought that far ahead. But I filed it. I left her office with a short list of instructions. First, do nothing visible. No confrontations. No hints. No changes in behavior toward my father or sister. Second, secure everything. She wanted certified copies of the deed filed with her office. She wanted the recording transferred to a secure server she used for client evidence. She wanted my notes printed, signed, and dated in front of a witness. Third, wait. She said the timing mattered. She said if I moved too early, my father could restructure things, bring in his own legal counsel, rewrite documents, complicate the co-ownership situation in ways that would take years to untangle. She said the strongest position was the one he didn't see coming. I went home and I did exactly what she said. Over the next 10 days I was the most normal version of myself. I attended a family dinner. I helped my father move some boxes in his garage on a Saturday morning. I made small talk. I laughed at the right moments. My wife did the same. She is a remarkable person. She knew what we were doing and she carried it without a single crack in her composure. My daughter went to school, did her homework, watched her shows, drew pictures. She drew one of herself and her grandfather standing in his garden. She taped it to the fridge. I looked at it every morning while I made coffee. Meanwhile, my lawyer was moving quietly on her end. She had contacted a colleague who specialized in estate law to review the will's biological descendants clause specifically. The opinion came back within a week. The clause was legal but narrow, and given my co-ownership position, it created what she called a structural conflict in the estate. Meaning, the will, as written, promised something my father did not have the sole authority to deliver. She also flagged something I hadn't noticed in my own documentation. The retirement property had been listed as the primary asset in the will. Not the family home, that had a separate arrangement tied to my mother's name. Not the bank accounts. The retirement property was the centerpiece. The thing my father most wanted to control. The thing he'd built his entire retirement plan around. And my name was on it. I sat with that for a while. Then I called my lawyer and told her I was ready to move to the next step. She asked what outcome I wanted. I had thought about this carefully. I didn't want the property. That was never the point. I didn't want to take something from my father out of anger or spite. What I wanted was specific and I told her exactly that. I wanted my daughter recognized. I wanted her name in that will alongside every other grandchild. Equal. Unconditional. Not a footnote. Not a separate provision. The same line. The same language. And I wanted it done through legal channels, not a family conversation, because a family conversation could be undone the moment I left the room. My lawyer said she could make that happen. She said she would send a formal letter to my father's lawyer. Professional. Unemotional. Outlining my co-ownership rights and requesting a meeting to discuss the estate structure. No accusations. No threats. Just facts and a meeting request. She said it would arrive on a Wednesday. She said by Thursday morning, my father would understand exactly what he had forgotten. I asked her how she thought he'd respond. She said, people usually respond to legal letters the way they respond to everything else. Your father sounds like a man who expects things to go quietly his way. She paused. That's about to change. I thanked her and ended the call. I went downstairs. My daughter was at the kitchen table doing a worksheet from school. She asked me to help her with one of the questions. Something about fractions. I sat down next to her and we worked through it together. She got it right on the first try. They thought it was just another day. It wasn't. I didn't tell her what happened. She's too young for the details and the details aren't hers to carry. What she knows is this. A few weeks after that Monday meeting, my mother, her grandmother, called and asked if she could take her out for the afternoon. Just the two of them. Ice cream and a bookshop, the way they used to do before my mother's health slowed things down. My daughter came home with 3 books and a keychain she'd picked out for my wife and a drawing she'd done in the back of my mother's car of the two of them sitting at the ice cream counter. She put it on the fridge next to the one of her and my father in the garden. I didn't say anything about that. Some things you let sit where they are. My father and I haven't spoken much since the meeting. Not with coldness, exactly. More with the particular distance that forms when two people understand each other clearly for the first time and don't entirely like what they see. We will find our way back to something, or we won't. That part one can't control. What I can control is what my daughter grows up knowing, that she was chosen, that she is equal, that the people in her life who are worth keeping will make that clear without being asked. The ones who need a legal letter to get there, She'll figure those out herself when she's ready. She's already better at people than most adults I know. The revised will arrived at my lawyer's office on a Thursday. She called to confirm the language. My daughter's name. Full recognition. Same line as everyone else. I said thank you and hung up and went back to whatever I was doing. I don't remember what it was. Something ordinary. Something quiet. That night, everything was quiet.